realfaith.org.au.
So we had an idea just to climb up this waterfall and jump off, and we were running out and jumping off, and when I did my second attempt, I slipped as I was going out, like jumping out, and I lost my footing. And if I hit the rock wall, I would have probably bounced and been fine. If I was probably another foot out, I maybe wouldn't have hit the shallow sand. But unfortunately, I came straight down like a pole, and that's when your vertebrae collide, and that breaks your vertebrae.
Welcome to Real Faith, conversations about the impact faith has on our lives and the challenges we go through, helping us today and giving us hope for tomorrow. That's real people, real life and real faith with Eric Scatterbo.
Glenn Cairns was 19 years old and living in Papua New Guinea when a tragic event occurred that changed his life forever. Today, Glenn joins us from his home in Orange, New South Wales to share his story and how despite many setbacks he's experienced in life, he just keeps on serving the Lord and serving others. Glenn Cairns, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Eric. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and we're going to hear about that tragic event that occurred in Papua New Guinea when you were 19 years old. But before we get to that, let's find out a little bit about your background. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Sydney and moved to Tweed Heads. So I grew up in Tweed Heads, New South Wales. So it's right on the border of Queensland and New South Wales. So very parochial New South Wales supporter.
And what was your childhood like?
So I've got 4 brothers. I'm fourth in the line of 5 boys. So I had a beautiful mum, grew up in a Catholic church, went to a Catholic school predominantly, and so I grew up surfing and fishing. My dad was an avid fisher, so we'd go out in the ocean fishing. So that's how I sort of grew up, with 4 wild brothers and, and an adventurous father and a lovely mum. So I had quite a beautiful family and beautiful place to grow up.
And were you involved in sports as a youngster?
Yeah. I started playing rugby league when I was 4, I think my mother told me. Mm-hmm. So I was a sports fanatic, and anything sports related, I absolutely loved it. I've actually grown up a bit, and I think sports are a bit overrated. But anyway, that was my passion, just sports and doing exciting things.
And did you have visions of one day becoming a sports star?
Yeah, that was pretty much my whole life, was wanting, so our school made the state final, and so we were pretty much like rock stars walking around the school. So
oh wow,
yeah, we were rock stars because they'd just shut down the whole school pretty much, so they could come and watch us play. So pretty much the whole school, and at the time we were the biggest school in New South Wales, so it was quite a big state school. I was in the top 15 in the school, so we made the state final out of that, and so it was a big year. And I think there was 3 in our team. They were Australian schoolboys, mm-hmm. and a few of my friends from that team went on and played in NRL.
Oh, wow. So the sky was the limit for you if you really pursued it.
Yeah, I was still growing at that stage, so I still had a bit of hope, but common sense was starting to kick in, and I saw a few people get some pretty serious injuries, and so common sense actually prevailed. That's why I went up to Papua New Guinea to finish off my schooling.
Yeah, why were you going up to Papua New Guinea?
Yeah, so I dropped out of school a few times because football was the number 1 priority in my list of things to do. And then I actually thought I'd better finish my HSC off. So my parents moved up to Papua New Guinea. And I couldn't get a trade at the time in Tweed Heads because that was the recession we had to have through Paul Keating. I would have been a tradesman for sure. I was really mm-hmm. good with my hands. Mm-hmm. Grew up on work sites. All my brothers are refrigeration mechanics and carpenters. My dad's a refrigeration mechanic, so that's why he was up in Papua New Guinea.
Oh, I was going to say, what brought your parents up to PNG?
Yeah, so he lost all the work during that recession, so he ended up getting a really good job up in Papua New Guinea, running a refrigeration company, mm-hmm. or managing one. Yep. It was quite hard when they left. I lived with my grandma for a while. She was a beautiful lady, so she took me in. But it was just too hard I didn't have the stability to do my HSC there, so I took off up to New Guinea to try and finalise that.
Okay. How was life living up there?
Yeah, it was a big change, Papua New Guinea. So the tropics, I was around water still, and coral reefs are amazing. It's a pretty wild country. As my dad would put it, you're either a mercenary or a missionary.
Huh.
So you're up there to make money.
What did he mean by that?
Yeah, you're either up there to serve God or serve money, I guess, in his funny way. He would say that. He made it very clear he's up there to make money. And the kina back then was $1.50 Australian, so he was actually on a really good wage when you converted it into Australian dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a house we lived in, and it was really like they have not servants in a way, but they are servants in a way because they're paid very, very poorly. And my mother didn't want it, so actually culturally for me it was a real eye opener. I wasn't a Christian at the time, but it did have a big impact on my life that I became very grateful for what we have in Australia.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So they're a very poor country, and in a sense we were living like millionaires. So you'd walk out of the shopping centre with a big basket full of groceries, and they're walking out with a packet of rice and a tin of tuna. So it did have a big impact on me living up there. And my mum she didn't want to have any servants, so to speak. So my dad said, well, if we don't employ them, the company actually employed them to look after the house. And so they would have been on the street otherwise. And that was a big eye-opener as well. And I actually used to go out and talk to them and spend some time with them, and they just had a concrete floor that they lived on and slept in. It's just a very horrible sort of, up in New Guinea, that was actually upper class for them. So yeah.
So very eye-opening for a young man to see all this, be exposed to it.
Yeah. I wish a lot of even my kids, I wish my kids could have gone and experienced something like that. Just be grateful for what we have in Australia.
So you're living in Papua New Guinea at the time and maturing and growing as a human being, and then tragedy strikes. Take us back to what happened.
Yeah, so I was going to school. So probably before that, leading up to that, I got caught up with the missionary kids. So they just kept loving me. I grew up Catholic, sort of very staunch Catholic upbringing, and I'm suddenly confronted with these missionary kids who have a very good grasp of the Bible and what salvation is all about. And so I would argue with them nearly on a daily basis.
Oh, wow.
And they just kept loving me. And so that was my sort of school in my year 11. I actually finished year 11 finally. But they just kept loving me. I ended up going to a youth group with them, and they used to make the best chocolate cake I've ever had in my life. And they were very, very nice young girls and very friendly. So it wasn't anything untoward, but just the attraction that they just kept loving me, and I used to go home and lay on my bed at night thinking about the things they used to say, and I'd dream up another argumentative thing to throw at them the next day, and they just kept loving me and answering my questions. And so yeah, and then December 87, I finally finished year 11, so we went off to celebrate that big occasion, and so we sailed from Lae, Papua New Guinea. It was about an hour sail, so one of my mates his father had a sailboat. In Papua New Guinea, most of the people there all had boats. My father had a boat, so boats were a big thing in our lifestyle up there. So we sailed over to this waterfall, and it was a big hike to the waterfall. So we decided to jump in the boat, and we all decided to go ahead. There was about six young men, and we got to the waterfall, and as we were quite hot up there when I don't know if anyone's been in the tropics, it's the humidity and the heat.
Oh yeah.
So and the water running down from the mountains was really icy cold actually.
Yeah.
So it was beautiful just to dive in there. And so we had an idea just to climb up this waterfall and jump off, as we did, and we were running out and jumping off. And when I did my second attempt, I slipped as I was going out, like jumping out, and I lost my footing, and I virtually landed. If anyone's walked behind a waterfall, the waterfall, when it flows down, it was quite deep where the waterfall hit, but there was that shallow sand between the rock wall and the waterfall. So I was up probably maybe 30 feet up in the air while we were launching ourselves out. And if I hit the rock wall, I would have probably bounced and been fine. If I was probably another foot out, I maybe wouldn't have hit the shallow sand. So there's all those ifs in there. But unfortunately, I came straight down like a pole, and that's when your vertebrae collide, and that breaks your vertebrae.
You weren't able to jump far enough out to get away from that shallow part.
Yeah, when I lost my footing, I sort of went into a tumble, and the way I put it is you just land the perfect place to break your neck. So pretty much you hyperextend your neck forwards toward, like your chin towards your chest, and that's what breaks the vertebrae in your spine. So I broke C5 and C6. So if anyone knows the cervical spine, that's the two above the big bony one in your neck.
Mm-hmm.
The big bony one's the C7. So I broke the two vertebrae above that. So they pretty much classed me as a C6 tetraplegic. That's the medical terminology.
Our guest today is Glenn Cairns from Orange, who's sharing his incredible life journey. We just heard how a tragic accident in Papua New Guinea changed his life forever. However, as we'll hear, there's much more to Glenn's story, and God has much more in store for him. We'll find out what happens next in Glenn's life when we return right here on Real Faith.
The Word for Today is Australia's most widely read daily devotional, designed to give you practical teaching to keep you focused on your relationship with Jesus. Read it online or subscribe to the free printed edition at thewordfortoday.com.au.
You're listening to Real Faith, conversations with real people about how God works in their lives. If you want to know more about integrating faith into your life, our website is realfaith.org.au. Just go to the website and you'll find helpful articles about the impact faith can have on your life. Once again, that's realfaith.org.au.
Welcome back. I'm Eric Scatabo, and today I'm chatting with Glenn Cairns from Orange in New South Wales. Sadly, as we heard before the break, tragedy occurred in Papua New Guinea when Glenn and his mates decided to jump into the water next to a waterfall. As Glenn said, he lost his footing when it was his turn, and he wasn't able to jump far enough away from the shallow part on the side. Unfortunately, he ended up landing at the worst possible spot and broke his neck. Now Glenn shares what happened next. So you're injured, very seriously injured, in this pool of water. How'd you get out of there?
I was floating face down in the water, and it was quite cold actually. So I've come up straight away knowing I couldn't move anything, so I knew something really bad was wrong. So I was conscious. I just remember hitting the sand, and I came up, and I was about to drown in a sense. I ran out of the oxygen, so I was about to ingest the water. But fortunately, my friends, they actually thought I was playing a prank on them.
Oh.
So they were sort of sitting back, watching, and then I think they twigged that something was wrong. So they just turned me over in time, because that would have been pretty fatal, actually.
Oh, wow.
If I ingested a lot of water in my lungs. So they did all the right things. Weirdly, I just can't explain. Maybe all subconsciously watching movies, medical movies. They knew to wrap a towel around my neck and keep me stable. So they kept me in the water, but the water was quite cold, and I was getting very cold very quickly. So they got a plank of wood and lifted me out. And then they had to radio someone, so someone ran off to get a radio call out, and because everyone knew it was pretty serious.
So eventually some medical help arrived?
Yeah, they got to the yacht, and fortunately there was another yacht had pulled up, and the lady on the yacht was a nurse, so they had a stretcher on the yacht. So they brought the stretcher along with them, and they got the radio call out to my father. Another fortunate thing was my father's best friend. He used to manage the helicopter business over there. They stretchered me, long story short, they stretchered me to the shore, which was a pretty big hike, and the helicopter picked me up and got me into Lay Hospital, where they actually put me in traction in the Lay Hospital. And
then, several months recovery?
They had to fly me out because of the severity of my injury. It's a funny story, because the room I was put in, the school, we volunteered to paint the hospital as a charity sort of type thing. I ended up in the room that I actually painted.
Is that right?
The walls. Yeah.
Huh. Oh, wow.
And because buai, I don't know if anyone who's been up in, they chew buai a lot, and the lime I think they add to it turns red, and they spit it everywhere. And my mother was quite horrified by the care up there. They just haven't got the money to put in their medical system, and the helicopter pilot's wife was a doctor, so I had immediate care straight away. So they were putting calls out to try and get me out. They knew they had to get me out of Papua New Guinea, otherwise I would have died. So they were trying desperately they were ringing the Air Force to see if they could do a medical evacuation. So they ended up getting a company based in Townsville. I don't remember the name of the company, but they So they flew me out of Papua New Guinea that night, so I had to get out pretty quick. And I ended up in Princess Alexandra Hospital in Brisbane, so really early the next morning.
Wow, so that in itself was quite amazing and miraculous that you were able to go from PNG to Australia and get very good medical care right away.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to have that, because my mum, this is a funny story. My mum came in. My mum's a cleany person, like with 5 boys. Obviously, she's got to be very clean. So when she saw the evacuation team put clean sheets on me, she actually she thought I was going to be in good care from there on. So it put her at ease that all these sterile sheets were coming out. And they're an amazing team that flew up from Townsville. They were just a really amazing bunch of people. Mm-hmm. And if they're actually listening, I never got a chance to thank them. They were just an amazing bunch. Mm-hmm. Just that flight back from Papua New Guinea was quite bumpy, and I guess they had to give me pain medication to ease the pain of the broken bones, but not sedate me enough that I lose consciousness, I guess.
And this is in the 1980s at the time of this tragic accident?
Yeah, December 87.
Okay, so then your life changed forever because you were no longer able to walk after that.
Yeah, so they put me like in an intensive, so it was a spinal ward in Princess Alexandra Hospital. Is a brand new spinal ward, fortunately, so it was quite clean and up to date with all its technology. So it's like an ICU for spinal patients, and so you're in traction. They actually drill holes in the side of your skull.
Wow.
Yeah, they do it differently now, and they hang weights. So they put like, I don't know the best way I can explain it, like a big ice clamp, and so it goes into your skull, like little pins go into your skull. So I actually remember the mechanical drill they used. I can still feel the mechanics going into my skull. Yeah, so they drill a few mil into your skull, and then they put the clamp in, and then they hang weights off that clamp. So imagine yourself lying on your back, and you've got these weights hanging off, and that's so they can spread the vertebrae. So in traction they call it. So, and then I'm on a bed that flips side to side to stop any pressure sores.
Oh, right.
So it was very, very confronting, and there was people old age, mainly men have spinal injuries because they're climbing ladders and doing like climbing waterfalls and all those sort of things that young men do. So a lot of builders would break their backs falling on ladders, and so I think there was about 6 people died while I was in hospital in that ICU. Yeah, so hearing the sound of that line, that the line of the ECG, or that sound, and nurses rushing around. It was quite a very scary place to be.
Yeah,
as a 19-year-old.
Yeah, 19 years old, hearing people dying.
Yeah,
in the same room with you.
Yeah, it was very confronting.
So you can use your arms, but feeling stops from the chest down, is that right?
Yeah, pretty much around sort of nipple height, out there, chest. And then only muscles I have in my arms are sort of shoulder muscles. And I've got one muscle in my forearm, which is a wrist extensor. So I can pull my wrists back, and no finger function. Yeah, and getting used to not feeling parts of your hand and your arms is like I used to burn myself unknowingly, and it's quite a weird process to go through to realize what parts of your body can and can't feel. Pressure sores are a big issue, so they can, if you get a pressure sore on your bottom, and I've had a few in my time, and they can get infected. And, so they're a big thing to try and steer away from.
Yeah, so you go from having aspirations to being a sports star in the ideal world to not being able to walk and not having feeling from the chest down.
Yeah, it wasn't just the sports as well, though it was a big one, but it was more, I didn't have a career. So if you had a trade or something, like even tradesmen who end up with a spinal injury, they go through a lot of grief because they can't be a builder anymore.
Right.
So I'm going through the grief of I'm losing all the things that I could do. Yeah, my dreams of being any sort of career, just I had to reset really. I had to just go, well, what do I do now? And so one night I was on the ward. So they moved me out of the ICU ward where you've got all these nurses running around you, and they moved me out onto the main ward. and it was quite quiet. You don't have all the nurses running around, so even a little bit of spit going down your lung, you can nearly choke on it. So it's quite a very scary time, and it was dark one night, and I'm going through all this grief. So much grief. I've never felt grief like that. The only way I could explain it is like I was falling down a really dark well, and I was just crying out for help. And it was that real salient time where I cried out to God, and I said, well, God, if you're there, and prior to that, I guess before I had my injury, I was actually going back to church and with my mum. Yeah. And I'd be on my knees the whole time back at the Catholic Church, and I'd just be crying, calling out for God, where are you, God? And I think that really search for God, like a lot of people say that I just found God as to appease like the atheists actually say things like, you just found God to make yourself feel better that there's a higher being, but it wasn't the case. So actually, I was really looking seriously for God before my accident, because the love of these young Christian people around me, I just saw so real that there was something greater in these people, these young people who loved me. There was something more than what I grew up with. There was something more, and I knew it was God. So anyway, my poor old mum probably thought I was on drugs, and thought what was wrong with Glenn. Maybe thought I had a psychological problem. Anyway, I really cried out to God at that moment, and the best way I can explain it was like God put His hand under me, and He spoke to me, and He said, "Glenn, I've got you." And I just started crying, and I just that's when I found Jesus. I just knew there was a God in heaven. I actually felt like jumping out of the bed and running around the wards going, there is a God, and I was so excited, but I sort of opened my eyes because I was crying so bad. So my tears of real tears of grief and despair just turned into tears of joy and happiness. Yeah, I wanted to seriously, like the paralyzed man who got healed on the steps, and he jumped for joy. That was me. I wanted to run around and tell everyone there is a God in heaven.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, from the outside, there would look like no reason to rejoice. Your body is not what it used to be. It's hurting, and it's not working like it used to. But yet, emotionally, you're jumping for joy.
Yeah, it was a very depressing place. So once you get up and going, like, you're pretty much laying on your back. I was in traction for 3 months. So it was a very horrific time. So I got a lot of joy. God gave me the gift of joy, I guess, or I just had a joy, and people would tell me sad stories, and I'd start laughing. It was like a coping mechanism God gave me to cope with the amount of grief that was in that hospital. Yeah. So I'd just laugh, and I'd have to apologize sometimes to the people telling me. I'd say, look, I'm really sorry what's going on, but it's just something God's done in my life to make me cope with what's around me at the moment. And so I just laugh at things, and that carried on my whole life pretty much, right even up to now. I still laugh like I'll fall out of my wheelchair and start laughing. So it's just this gift of joy God's given me to not get anxious about things and realize that He's in control, and I just laugh at how funny maybe that would have looked if someone saw me falling out of my wheelchair.
Wow, so God just gave you that joy deep down in your heart, despite situation that would look like it shouldn't have any joy. But we're going to have to stop it right there, because unfortunately we've run out of time for this first conversation with you. Glenn, can we invite you to join us again next time to hear more of your story?
Yep, sure, no worries. It's a pleasure.
Well, that was part one of my conversation with Glenn Cairns from Orange in New South Wales. We invite you to join us next time to hear more of Glenn's story. Sadly, as we just heard, he became a quadriplegic when he was in Papua New Guinea. But also, we heard how the Lord entered his life at his lowest point in the hospital and gave him an unexplainable peace and joy. We'll hear more about that peace and joy next time when we hear part 2 of Glenn's story. Until then, I'm Eric Scadabo. So long, and God bless.
You've been listening to Real Faith, and if you have any questions or comments, you can send us a message through our website, realfaith.org.au. That's realfaith.org.au.
Real Faith is a production of Vision Christian Media.
This program is a production of Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, see vision.org.au.